Cap 1501, that there shall be charged upon and paid out of the consolidated fund debt charges for which the government is liable. And whereas the Minister of Finance considers it necessary to borrow the sum of EC $32,400,000 from the Bank of St. Lucia Limited for the purposes of financing the 2018-2019 budget in the amounts of EC $24,300,000 to finance the National Sports Infrastructure Strategy and Action Plan, and EC $8,100,000 to finance the 2018-2019 budget. And whereas the interest on each loan amount is repayable at a rate of 4.5% per annum, and whereas a commitment fee of 1% is payable on the establishment of each loan, and whereas the loan amount of EC $24,300,000 is repayable at EC $1,518,750 per quarter for 4 years, inclusive of interest up to $308,576.71 per quarter on a reducing balance basis. And whereas the loan amount of EC $8,100,000 is repayable at EC $506,250 per quarter for 4 years, inclusive of interest of up to EC $102,858.90 per quarter on a reducing balance basis. Be it resolved that Parliament authorizes the Minister for Finance to borrow the sum of EC $32,400,000 from the Bank of St. Lucia Limited for the purpose of financing the 2018-2019 budget in the amounts of EC $24,300,000 to finance the National Sports Infrastructure Strategy and Action Plan, and EC $8,100,000 to finance the 2018-2019 budget. Be it further resolved that the interest of each loan amount is payable at a rate of 4.5% per annum. A commitment fee of 1% is payable on the establishment of each loan, and the loan of EC $24,300,000 is repayable at EC $1,518,750 per quarter for 4 years, inclusive interest up to EC $308,576.71 per quarter on a reducing balance basis. The loan amount of EC $8,100,000 is repayable at EC $506,250 per quarter for 4 years, inclusive of interest up to EC $102,858.90 per quarter on a reducing balance basis. The resolution before Parliament, Mr. Speaker, is to borrow $32 million from the Bank of St. Lucia. Pursuant to the Memorandum of Understanding between the Government of the Republic of China, Taiwan, and the Government of St. Lucia, the Government of China, Taiwan has agreed to provide grant funding in the amount of $60 million to the Government of St. Lucia for the period of 5 years, 2017 to 2021. The intention is to draw down US $12 million annually over the said period. To date, the amount of $12 million was received by the Government of St. Lucia in 2017. The Government of St. Lucia, through the Department of Youth and Sports Development, agreed that US $12 million of the $48 million under the MOU to be utilized for the design, construction, and operation of the new upgraded sports and entertainment facilities. The NSSAP is expected to be executed in 2 phases. Phase 1 involves the development of a master plan and national sports strategy. Phase 2 involves the implementation of works and the purchase of goods and services in keeping with the NSSAP. The Parker Company was contracted in September of 2017 to undertake the master plan in Phase 1. The Government of St. Lucia has agreed to extend the services of the TPC as a program manager for Phase 2. In keeping with the anticipated $12 million expected for sports infrastructure under the MOU, the Department of Finance requested proposals for the bridging finance facility of US $12 million. This facility will provide immediate access to funding as opposed to the annual drawdown from the Republic of China, Taiwan. The government accepted the proposal from the Bank of St. Lucia for EC 32 million, which is equivalent to US 12 million. Of this amount, EC 24 million or 9 million will be utilized for the National Sports Strategy Action Plan, while the remaining 8.1 million or US 3 million will be used for the budget support for 2018-2019 estimates of expenditure. The EC 32 million loan from the Bank of St. Lucia will cost $2,025,000 per quarter over the 4 years, plus an interest rate of 4.5%. The payment of the NSSAP loan of 24 million or 9 million will be made from the grant funds, while the remaining 8.1 million or 3 million budget support loan will be funded from local revenue. So, Mr. Speaker, what my government decided to do with the grant funds that the government of China, Taiwan, so generously provided to our country is, instead of looking at it as $12 million per year, was to look at it holistically right now as $48 million. And what we've done is carved out projects specifically to be expended on using those monies. US dollars. So this is one of the projects that we've decided to commit 12 million US dollars to in order to be able to develop a new youth and sports strategy for St. Lucia. All too often, Mr. Speaker, what we have found is we have several different entities involved in the development of sports. The Ministry of Education, the Ministry of Youth and Sports, and then the funding tends to be primarily from Lotto and also from government. So from time to time, I'm sure both ministers of finance or all ministers of finance are approached to sponsor special CARICOM games, to attend Olympics, or if there's a team that's going to be traveling abroad, we're asked always, I call it on an ad hoc basis. It doesn't seem that we have a very coordinated effort towards the development of sports in our country. We've seen under the last administration, under the Lotto, that a fair amount of the money, in fact, most of the money was spent on what we call capital projects. And while some money was spent on programming, it didn't appear to be a consistent amount. And that each of the associations, I think, would apply to the Lotto in terms of hopes of getting support. And so between the Lotto and the Ministry of Sports, and then now the unknown entity being the private sector, we're also participating in this process, Mr. Speaker. So my government has decided to take a holistic view of this process. And through the Ministry of Sports is to tackle this thing from two ends. First of all, is to do a full audit of all of the sporting facilities that we have in St. Lucia. So in fact, the Parker Company, who had had prior experience in doing this in Barbados and in Singapore, just to name two countries, because we've done it in other countries, but those are two that are clearly in our backyard, and Singapore clearly is a country that we look to in terms of their progressiveness. In doing that audit, I think that they identified, and I think the Minister of Sports will be speaking more to that specifically, we identified over 150 sporting facilities that we currently have in the country. 150. If you just simply break that down on 17 constituencies, and I'm being exaggerating a little bit, but we're talking about at least 10 facilities per constituency. But the sad reality is many of those facilities are not operational. So they either have been built and have never been operationalized, or have been built and operationalized and have not been maintained all throughout St. Lucia. And it's almost like we are treating sports like they do fast food in America, that everybody wants to drive up to eat their meal. And it's almost like we've all become accustomed to wanting to have the basketball court, the football court, the cricket pitch. Everything needs to be right there in our backyard. And the reality is, Mr. Speaker, we can't afford that. Now, if we are to look right here in St. Lucia at a very successful model, one would have to look at the aquatic center in Rodney Bay. So you have a 25-meter swimming pool, in which I believe today there are 7 clubs that use that facility. And those clubs are at primary school level and at secondary school level. And at the primary school level, the clubs have beginners, intermediate, and advanced teams. And then at the secondary level, you'll have intermediate and advanced. They share in terms of time that they can use for training. And then there are regular tournaments that are taking place amongst themselves, because it's that competitive spirit that starts bringing out excellence. And so certainly the ability of the aquatic club inviting other clubs to come there, whether they're from other islands or internationally, and putting on tournaments on a regular basis, now allows that level of excellence to go to even a higher level. But the reality is that we must look behind the scene as to what allows that to take place. So you have a private sector entity that's built the pool and manages the pool in terms of making sure that they're collecting money. But it's the mothers and the fathers of the children that are participating in the clubs, and some of them who have already graduated, that are putting in the time to be coaches, to be the organization behind these entities. So it is the intention of our government, Mr. Speaker, to try to see if we can replicate that in our communities. So it is a very difficult task to expect that we're going to develop excellence in sports if we allow sports only to stay in the school system. Because kids are going from school from 8 o'clock until 2:30. So the education system is intended to have their sports tournaments, and through physical education, start to introduce kids now to different disciplines, whether it's swimming, whether it's running, whether it's bicycling, whether it's boxing, whether it's basketball, whatever it is, that they get introduced there. But when they go back home now at 2:30, they could now join a club. So if we can now create facilities in each of the communities in which multiple clubs are sharing in those facilities. So if you have one football field in which you use it for tournaments in its full size, but during the week you can use it laterally, in which you can have either 2 or 3 smaller fields in which 2 or 3 different groups could be practicing at the same time. And certainly the club organizers would now start organizing themselves in terms of the training. Clearly, if you now put lights on, the ability to now be able to get greater utilization of those facilities is even better. So if we now can take football as an example, Mr. Speaker, that if we can develop in each of the 17 constituencies, on average, 4 to 8 clubs that are in close proximity to each other and sharing in those facilities, it means that you can now have zonal games in which the teams now play against each other on a regular basis. We then can have a semi or a regional championship, and then you can have a national championship. Because the amount of time and the number of teams that would have to participate at a regional level would be less, and certainly even at a national championship level, even less. So from the cost perspective, it becomes much easier. So, Mr. Speaker, the intention of this program here is to be able to start with phase 1, which is about building these facilities, these common facilities. And I know the ministry is working assiduously on trying to identify what the key disciplines are going to be. Certainly, Cabinet has given a mandate that we believe that the disciplines, first of all, must be gender neutral. Two, it must have the capacity of developing scholarships. And three, we also should look at the professional leagues, because while not everybody is going to make it into a professional league, the opportunity of getting more young St. Lucians playing professionally not only helps them as a career, but also helps the country in terms of its own exposure at that international level. So the way that we're looking at it is that we've made a commitment to the Ministry of Youth and Sports that the government will be using resources like the ones that they're getting from China, Taiwan, and other resources to build out these facilities. And so the intention in phase one, I believe, is that they've identified 5 areas in which they're going to be building facilities. So one is in Deriso. It's a football field. So the idea was to go into a small community and see how that would work. The Miku Secondary School, in which we were looking to put a football field and also a 25-meter swimming pool. Soufriere, in which they are creating a mini stadium, and we've prioritized that because of what has taken place in Vieux Fort. So the idea is now to have a 400-meter track as well as a football field, fixing up the basketball courts, the netball courts, and if I'm not mistaken, there's also including a swimming pool as well in that area. And then there's also Dennery, in which now we're putting in both football as well as cricket, and then to be able to support the development of the sports academy in Gros-Islet is now adding facilities to the Gros-Islet Secondary School, so that in addition to putting in the facilities there, we felt that it was good because we already had a concentration of sports facilities for the academy. So you have the Darren Sammy Stadium, you have the 25-meter swimming pool, and you also have the indoor basketball court. So again, we could now, in that school, have access to this. So we're actually in the process, if I'm not mistaken, identifying a accommodation for the kids who are going to be boarding at this academy. Once we have done this, Mr. Speaker, my understanding is that they're already in an advanced stage of identifying the next projects to be able to go. So I think that we've identified, if I'm not mistaken, Minister, I think it's somewhere between 37 and 40 facilities that we're looking to be able to upgrade, Mr. Speaker, that they can be used in this club setting. Now, building these facilities by themselves, we've seen in past, Mr. Speaker, doesn't work. Not about having great facilities by itself, but where are the funds going to come to support the programs? And so the intention is that the funds that we're gaining and earning in the lottery, that those funds, if I can borrow my member from Castries South's term, invest into our youth in terms of now programming. So it's to make sure now that we're training coaches, we're paying for uniforms, that we're paying for the transportation, making sure that there's the necessary equipment that everybody has. But it certainly is the intention of our government, Mr. Speaker, to now take that money, which I believe comes close to something between $7 or $9 million on an annual basis, and meet with the private sector of this country in selling them a holistic plan on the support of sports. So certainly the idea, Mr. Speaker, that they can come in and get sponsorship on a national basis on all the different sports we have, and making sure that there is a concentration of funds to be able to really grow the sporting fraternity of our country is very, very important. So the sports academy that is due to open up, if I'm not mistaken, is September, Minister? Is in September. Is that you're going to have a coach that focuses on nutrition, a coach that focuses on fitness, a therapist, and also a psychologist, including each discipline would have its own coach. So the concentration of coaches of that level of excellence at this academy will also be the training of the trainer programs. So all the coaches now who are part of the clubs will be able to now doing regular training programs to up their skill. Because unfortunately, in the rural areas, and this is no different than anywhere part of the world, the coach that's coaching at the primary level and at the secondary school level has to be everything. He has to be the therapist, he has to be the nutritionist, he has to be the psychologist, and he has to be the coach. And what we've recognized when we look around the world, it is the excellence in coaching that ultimately makes that differentiation. Because this is not just about creating games for our young people. It's about a fundamental attitudinal change to how people approach life. And those of us who have been lucky enough to play sports understand those subtle life messages that we learn. The one of teamwork, the one of competitiveness, conflict resolution. And one of the more important ones is discipline. But the discipline only happens when there is excellence, when there is that level of competitiveness. And I always see this in Jamaica, in their athletics program. As a young person coming up, the bar has been set extremely high by the successful Olympic athletes that they have. But those things don't happen by accident. It's those young kids knowing from a young age that in order to be able to be faster than Usain Bolt, that they got to start practicing harder and longer and more effectively at a younger age. And the discipline that is required in order to surpass those milestones is a quality that continues with those young people their whole life. And we want to be able to develop an environment in our country in which young people after school are now participating in sports and in clubs. So when we present this program today, Mr. Speaker, this is not simply about building a couple of sports facilities. It is much bigger than that. It's about planting a seed to change the attitude. And I think, and hopefully the message has been beginning across, that our government wants young people to join clubs, not gangs. We want them to join clubs and not gangs. And key to that is that government and the general public and the private sector must come together to make this happen, Mr. Speaker. We must. So today what we've come to the House for is to seek an approval to borrow $24 million of what is going to be a $32 million investment. But we've already received the allocation for this year of $3 million US. And we're borrowing the money from the bank in order that we can execute the programs today. Because we've recognized, Mr. Speaker, that by building multiple facilities at the same time, and also by going out and getting bids, that we'd be much more successful by creating a critical mass of facilities. Versus if we spent the money on an annual basis, we would not be able to develop that critical mass to be able to execute this program. And as a result of it, we don't believe that we would get the same impact with the expenditure. So I can wholeheartedly say that I support this program, Mr. Speaker. This is one that I'm incredibly passionate about. And I know that my Minister of Youth and Sports, my Minister of Education, and clearly my cabinet colleagues, this is one that we've spent a lot of hours discussing and that we're fully behind. And I'm hoping that we can gain the support of my fellow parliamentarians today on the opposite side to support this program. As I said, from an exposure, financial exposure perspective, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Speaker, there is none. The monies are already here. They are grant funds. We are very grateful to the Bank of St. Lucia for giving us such generous conditions to the loan, cost of the loan, in order for us to expedite this project. And I'm very much looking forward to seeing the commencement of this project, particularly the project in Soufrière, And I would be dishonest if I didn't say that I'm also looking forward to seeing this take place in Micoud South. And Micoud South is one of the few constituencies that still does not have any facilities that has any lights. And certainly when you look at the use of the Micoud Secondary School as a major hub, I'm certainly very excited to see the expression on the kids' face when they get to go to a 25-meter swimming pool and have proper coaching and participating in tournaments, given the success of what we've seen of the aquatic club up north. So again, I look forward to everybody's support on this. Thank you, Mr.